Returning to a hostile home front inflicts more pain than many can bear. That special pain has shaped our Vietnam veterans. It has made them who they are today, and who they are is something extraordinary. They suffered so much, but all they really wanted to do was make sure that nothing like that ever happened to the veterans to follow them. So since then, it's been my goal to recognize Vietnam veterans, to give them the welcome home that they did not receive 50 years ago. It's been 50 years since the end of hostilities in Vietnam, but we haven't forgotten you. Thank you for your service. Welcome home. Now I still trying to get out of the way.
And I am the Adult Services Supervisor and current Acting Director of the Library. I'm so glad that the rain held off so that you could all join us here today. And I would like to start with a huge round of applause for the members of the Biddeford High School Band and the Massachusetts Color Guard.
Many who were silent for many years and not properly recognized for their service when returning home. This is for you, and long overdue. As a veteran of that conflict, I was asked to share my perspective on the Vietnam War. To set a patriotic tone, I'd like to play my favorite, Susan March, Stars and Stripes Forever. I served in the Marine Corps from 1967 to 1972 as a helicopter pilot. Spent 12 months in Vietnam from December of 69 to December of 70, flying the CH-46 helicopter, which is a cargo type troop carrying helicopter. Our missions included day and night medevacs, troop inserts, troop emergency extracts, reconnaissance, resupply, search and rescue missions, all from Marble Mountain Air Facility in Da Nang, South Vietnam. I wrote a book about my years in the military titled Hovering in Harm's Way, a Marine Pilot's Journey to Vietnam and Back. Autographed copies will be available for a donation of $20 after the session is over. Sarah Bloom here will be at the back table taking that information. All proceeds from this book sale will go to Homes for Our Troops. It's a national rated, highly rated charity with 90% of all donations going to Vietnam veteran housing and other needs. While stationed in Vietnam, I had many questions regarding why we were there and why we were fighting a civil war in this country. The local Vietnam people seemed neutral regarding their support of whoever was in their village. It could have been the ARVNs, which is the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Could have been the US troops. Could have been the VC, or Vietnamese Communists, or the NVA, National North Vietnamese Army. It really didn't make any difference to them. They just wanted to farm their fields, and they could care less about political affiliations. South Vietnam Communist sympathizers, called VC, as I said, Vietnam Communists, were embedded within cities and villages across South Vietnam. Therefore, we could not, and they obviously had to have some local support to survive. Therefore, we could not trust them completely, since we're not sure whether they were friendly or foe. Our military leadership also did not seem to be using our overwhelming assets trying to control advantageous territory gained after battlefield successes. Our troops would frequently be ordered to leave hard-fought ground, conquered ground, merely to have the enemy reposition themselves after our departure. That did not seem like we were trying to win that war, but merely win battles via enemy body count. The only justification for being there, as far as I was concerned, was to be in support of our troops who were in a very difficult conditions. Unsure who the civilians were and who the enemy was. They had to slog through wet, muddy terrain and jungle environments for an unseen enemy, mostly hiding in tunnels and laying in ambush for them. I have pondered over the years reasons for the U.S. involvement and continued support for a failed South Vietnam corrupt regime. They were not communist, but they were dictatorial. Why did we first get involved in the Civil War, and why did we wait 20 years to finally withdraw our troops and allow Vietnam to fall to communism, contrary to our original reason for even being there? I also researched other topics to understand how and why the VC and the NVA were such hardened, resistant fighters. They successfully used guerrilla tactics to fight against a much better armed and equipped foreign forces, but they did suffer heavy troop losses in all major battles. I am not aware of any major battle that they dominated or won. They usually withdrew and disappeared into their tunnel complexes. I have compiled what I consider are some of the answers to those questions, in my opinion. First question: why did North Vietnam develop such great guerrilla tactics? Vietnam was under hundreds and actually almost over 1,000 years of foreign occupation, which included Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Myanmar, which back then was Burma. Then France came along and had some imperialistic ideas and said, you know, we ought to have some colonies in Southeast Asia. So they invaded, and one of the biggest reasons why is the economic interest in rice, rubber, opium, and cheap labor, and secure trade routes to China. By 1885, French Indochina was officially established, which included Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Before I talk about Japan, I want to add a fact here. In 1930, Ho Chi Minh founded the Indo-Chinese Communist Party and Viet Minh, a communist-led organization and guerrilla force, to resist and fight against foreign occupation. In 1940, Japan obviously was fighting worldwide in World War II. So they invaded and took over Indochina. And they were throughout the area, all the way down to Burma. In 1945, of course, they were defeated with our aid, and we forced them out of the area. However, in 1946, France approached and said, we would like to have a colony again. We would like to have the French Indochina. And we agreed with them. So they went back in, and they actually bombed Haiphong Harbor in order to take control. And this was with U.S. aid. So now, from 1954 to 1973, we have the very first, or the second, I should say, the second Indochina War. And that involves the United States. So you can see through all of those years of occupation and resistance and fighting, you can see why they developed such strong guerrilla tactics. Next question. Oh, I want to show you get you some reference. First of all, this is all of Vietnam, the north as well as the south. On the east, bordered by the South China Sea, north by China, west by Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia. I want you to take particular notice to this area, which is the Gulf of Tonkin, and this area right here in red. This is a 1970s map, so by then, obviously, they had established a demilitarized zone, which is that red area. It ran 47 miles from Laos to the South China Sea. We'll get back to that a map later as well. Okay, the next question is, what prompted initial U.S. involvement in Vietnam? First of all, as I told you, the French had gotten back in there, and the Viet Minh, or the Communist North Vietnamese fighters, defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu. That was the final battle where the French were thrown out, and that was May of 1954. We, of course, supported the French, so we were not thrilled that, the French were defeated. Then in June of 1954, Geneva Accord was established, as well as a DMZ, parallel separating North and South Vietnam. We had a couple of presidents, Truman and Eisenhower, who believed in the domino theory. And the domino theory is, if one country falls, many others could fall and change the world map of communism versus democracy. And so in Southeast Asia, they felt if Vietnam fell, so would Cambodia, so would Laos, so would Thailand, so on and so forth. So that's the reasoning that they established what's called a MAG, which is the Military Assistance Advisory Group. They were a group of advisors that went in to help South Vietnam plan and fight and develop tactics to fight off the VC and the NVA. Eisenhower in particular, by the time he was leaving office, he had gone from just a couple of advisors to 320. Then President Kennedy was elected, and he was advised that he should increase this support, and he did. And they went up to 1,600 during his term. But let me get the date correct. I want to make sure I get the correct date here. In December, I'm sorry, November 2nd, 1963, President Diem was assassinated. And interestingly enough, we found that we were involved. CIA supported, as well as the US supported that assassination. Because Diem was a dictator, and he wasn't exactly following some of the things that we felt he should follow. So unfortunately, we're involved in that. An interesting factoid after that, you'll notice I said that November 2nd, 1963 was when Diem was assassinated. JFK was assassinated in that same month, on the 22nd. So that brought LBJ into the picture. Lyndon Baines Johnson.
There's a blackout button, you have to hit that, to unblack it.
Is that?
Yeah.
There it is, okay. Okay, next question. What initiated direct U.S. involvement versus North Vietnam? Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, on August 4th, 1964, in the Gulf of Tonkin, which I pointed out to you in that earlier map, two destroyers, the Maddox and the Turner J, were supposedly attacked by North Vietnamese gunboats. However, some evidence suggests that was greatly exaggerated, or even fabricated. Not confirmed, but possibly. But Congress was approached to retaliate and authorize military action by LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president. So on August 5th, 1964, Congress authorized an air attack on North Vietnam. So from Navy ships in the Gulf of Tonkin and in the South China Sea, they flew into Hanoi, in the Hanoi area, in the Haiphong area, and bombed. As a result of that, first day, I don't know if you recall the name or if it rings a bell, Navy Lieutenant Everett Alvarez. He was the first pilot shot down and captured by the North Vietnamese and was a POW in the famed Hanoi Hilton until 1963.
73.
73. So that's 9 years. Okay, let's take another look at this map. As I pointed out, here's the Gulf of Tonkin. Haiphong Harbor's in here, and Saigon is right there. Hanoi. Sorry, thank you. I want to point out another thing too. You can't see it very well from where I'm sitting, but there's a very light line here. It's kind of yellow in color, I guess. Starts from the southern part of North Vietnam and goes all the way along the western border of South Vietnam. Does anybody know what that is?
Yep, that's the supply route.
Ho Chi Minh Trail. And that fed into many areas into South Vietnam. That plays a vital role here shortly. Okay, when did U.S. combat troops begin operations and increase levels in South Vietnam? October 6, 1963, the Green Beret established an outpost at Plei Me. This is about 40 miles southwest of Pleiku, which is in the central highlands of Vietnam. Maybe I can show that to you if I can get back to the map real quick. Yeah, I can. Approximately in this area right here, Pleiku is there, and you can see the trail, right here. You can see the trail gets real close to Laos. And that's where the Green Beret wanted to be because they wanted to monitor the number of troops and arms that were going down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. On March 8th, 1965, 3,500 Marines landed in Da Nang and started establishing bases to launch military operations. October 19th through 25, in 1965, Plei Me was attacked by an NDA regiment. They were in serious trouble, and they had 23 Green Beret at the outpost. And when the attack began, they called for help. And 350 Montagnard mercenaries led by Major Charlie Beckwith. And he's a well-known Delta Force creator and a counterinsurgency expert. So they went in to help. But I mean, still, there were 2,000 of them and only under 400 of us. So they called in air support, and if it wasn't for air support, that would have been overrun. But the air support pushed the NVA back, and they were able to get out of there. As a result of that attack, in November 14, 1965, the U.S. Army Air Cavalry assaulted the Iadrang Valley. I don't know if that's familiar to you, but there was a movie made of this called We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson, who played Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, who was in charge of this operation. They came in with 200 troops. What they didn't know was in those mountains was over 4,000 NVA. Not good odds at all. However, they held them back, along with a lot of air support, obviously, and were able to leave the field, and they had 50% casualties, 200 out of 400. Interesting thing about Hal Moore, Major Hal Moore, he's now, or was a lieutenant colonel, brave man. He always insisted on being the very first person off the helicopter on the ground in any combat area, and the last one to leave. And he did that in the Iadrang Valley as well. 1964 to 1968, General William Westmoreland commanded the forces in Vietnam. His philosophy was a philosophy of war of attrition. He didn't believe in holding territory, as I talked about earlier. He just believed in killing as many enemies as possible. In 1963 and to 1968, President Johnson's troop levels were increased to 530,000 by 1968, I should say. And the biggest reason for this is Westmoreland kept asking for more and more troops from Johnson, saying that if I just have a few more troops, we can win this war. Well, we all know how that turned out. Okay, I want to point out some of those areas around on this map. This is a map of strictly South Vietnam. This is when we took over in South Vietnam, as far as combat operations were, we established what's called core tactical zones, and there were 4 of them. There was this area, which was the first corps. We referred to it as I Corps because that's where all of our Marines were. I was stationed right here. This is where Da Nang is. 2 Corps was here, where mostly Army, and you can see Pleiku is right here. So Plei Me was right here, and the Iadrang Valley was in that same area where Colonel Moore was, his forces were. In 3 Corps was Saigon mainly, and a lot of Air Force personnel there. And then in the south, 4 Corps was the Delta area, mostly Navy personnel. So now, what was the turning point in U.S. commitment to this war? In January to September 1968, the Tet Offensive occurred. Throughout South Vietnam, including Saigon, Hue, Quai Son, Con Thien, Pleiku, all of these areas were being attacked. General William Westmoreland said that the VC and the NVA couldn't possibly coordinate an attack throughout that whole throughout all of South Vietnam. Well, guess what? They did. We lost a lot of people. Again, we fought all the battles. In Saigon, we lost 2,100 KIA, the Arvins, 4,000. But the VC and NV lost 40,000 men. In January to March of '68, that was when the Hue siege occurred. That was one of the bloodiest battles of the war. The Marines and the Arvins fought to retake the city. We had 668 KIA, 3,707 wounded. 5,113 North Vietnamese Army regulars were killed. In January to July, Khe Sanh was attacked. 205 US KIA, 1,662 wounded, all Marines. 5,000 NVA KIAs. So I guess according to Westmoreland, that would have been a successful siege. February 1968, Walter Cronkite was at Hue. He was a combat correspondent, CBS News anchor, and one of the most respected men in the United States at that time. And he declared that this war is mired in a stalemate and should be abandoned. As a result, countrywide protests of the war became more frequent and violent. March of 1968, My Lai massacre occurred. Lieutenant Calley's army platoon slaughtered 300 villages, all children, women, and old men, unarmed. So certainly that did not, it shocked the US public, but into greater consciousness. You know, we've got to do something about this. This is crazy. In 1969, US troop level hit 543,000. That's when I was there. Again, a lot of talk of reducing those troops, but in spite of that, the levels kept increasing. People were really upset by that fact, that we were losing Americans and we're sending more over there. On May of 1970, Kent State University protests, National Guard fired on and killed 4 students and 9 wounded. Unarmed students, obviously. Sad commentary, but a scenario where they were throwing things at the National Guard, but bottles and things like that, but they had no weapons. And one of the guardsmen panicked and fired, and then others followed, and that's why this occurred. That ignited a nationwide demand for the end of the war. In July of 1970, in spite of all the talk about starting to bring troops home and ending the war, Nixon orders the invasion of Cambodia, expanding the war. People went crazy because, they had a reason to do it. I understand the reasoning. There was a heavy cache of arms in Cambodia. So they decided they were going to go in there and get rid of that cache of arms so we could stop all of, a lot of the attacks and the fighting. But the fact that they had been talking about bringing people home and then expanding the war into Cambodia, I think it was kind of a last straw for the US public. So, what marked the beginning of the end of this war for the US? From